Welcome to the Holo Health Podcast, where we help you become healthy in every area of your life.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Holo Health Podcast. We're pumped for today's conversation. I have two good-looking gentlemen in the studio with me. The first is Alex. Alex, say hello.
Hello.
Thank you, sir. And then the third gentleman in this conversation is Mr. Eric Bland. I'm pumped for our conversation. Eric, how are you doing, sir?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much to both of you guys for having me on.
Yeah, well, we're pumped to have you on. I know, probably some of our listeners, Eric, know who you are kind of vaguely, or maybe they have absolutely no idea who Eric Bland is. Regardless, we love to just start right there. We want to start and know who Eric Bland is and how you're connected with Holo Health.
Absolutely. So let's see here. Eric Bland's owner operator of CrossFit DGA here in Dublin, Georgia. Wife is Natalie Bland. I've got two young boys, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, Brady and Palmer. Those three are my life. My wife is sort of, I think that behind every man, obviously we always hear that there's a strong woman. And so she's that for me. And so she's just the glue that keeps us together. And so for what it's worth, there is no Eric Bland without Natalie Bland. So,
amen. I would agree. There is none.
Eric, I am jealous of Trevor's situation because he gets to hang out and talk with you a little bit more, knows you a little bit more. But I know we are just new to our relationship. So if you could just let me and all the listeners know just a little bit of your story on who you are, but really where God has taken you over the past handful of years, and really just kind of incorporate just your health journey in that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try to make it as short and as condensed as I can, but I think I would not be servicing all the listeners as much as I can if I didn't tell you about all the bad stuff. Or all the things that happened in like 2000, early 2000s into 2007. So I started drinking and using drugs early in the early 2000s. And I did that for a really long time. And that was really part of my identity. I didn't really have an identity outside of that. I just liked to party. Somehow I graduated college by the grace of God, not knowing that he had his hand in this the whole time. So I get through 2007, moved back to Dublin. Dublin, Georgia is where I'm from. I was at Georgia College, graduated from there, ended up back in Dublin. And the craziest thing happened. Like I really hit rock bottom, and the Lord really put me on my tail. And this would have been 2008. And I just came to the conclusion that I had to stop drinking alcohol. And maybe November of 2009, I found a book. And so for any of you listeners out there that are struggling with drugs and alcohol or pornography or anything, there's a great book out there, Michael Scott Peck, and it's The Road Less Traveled. He is a Christian author, and it is written for people that have abused drugs, alcohol. I highly encourage everybody to read that book. And it really will reveal a lot of great things to you. They don't feel great at the time because it's a lot of insecurities, and it's a lot of things that we go through, and how we hide behind certain things, and how we lie, and how we cover up, and all those crazy things. So that would have been 2008, 2009. And so around about the same time, just so happened I found CrossFit. And there is no doubt in my mind that God ordained all of that. He ordained the book. I started to get sober. I started to clean my life up. And then all of a sudden he puts fitness into my life because he knew that I needed something physical to do with my body and my hands and my mind to occupy me, because I had partied for so long, and you just get into these habits and these behaviors that aren't serving you, right? We all do it. Unfortunately for me, mine was to the point where I had become a danger to myself and society. So all that being said, read the book, things just start to really unfold. Like, well, that, you start to sober up and you start to realize like you have made a lot of bad decisions, and now it's time to fix and mend relationships. It's time to get out of certain relationships. It's time to move on. It's time to clean up the environment. And so I do that. I find fitness, and then I meet Natalie. And then the Lord just starts doing amazing things from there. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm still kind of got one foot in with religion and one foot out. Like he still hasn't really, I really haven't fallen on my butt yet from a spiritual standpoint, because I still think that I've got everything. I've overcome drugs. I've overcome alcohol. And now I meet the woman of my dreams. And then, the great thing was we started to have children. And then children have this really interesting way of revealing to yourself who you really are and what you stand for and the values that you have. And then I guess from there, doing the gym thing. And then I'll fast forward to 2020. We've had a successful business. We've done really well. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits. And I think this is super important to share this, because this is where my ego really got the best of me. And I'll never forget, somebody came to me. We were loaning out gym equipment so that we could keep our members. We were going to try to keep as many members as we could. So we just started loaning out dumbbells and kettlebells. We loaned out barbells. We loaned out weights. We were doing all this stuff. And this guy came to me and he said, Eric, he told me about this other business owner that was doing these really great things for all of his employees. And as he was telling me that, I was like, well, what about me? Nobody's complimenting me. And I'll never forget, I give him the equipment. He leaves. I get in my car and I'm like driving down the road, and I just feel this like, obviously it's the Holy Spirit working, it's working in my heart. And I realize that my pride and my ego had gotten the best of me, and that 2020 was a game changer for me. It really put me on my butt spiritually, and it really revealed to me who I really was. And what I really was somebody that wanted recognition, and I wanted affirmation, and I wanted somebody to tell me I was doing a great job. It's all the things that the world tells us that we need, when really the only recognition and the affirmation that we really need is from the Lord. And so through that process, I decided that I ended up getting baptized again. Had heard, so crazy, man. The whole thing is just nuts. So I have a podcast called the Ruthlessly Curious Podcast. And the reason it's called the Ruthlessly Curious Podcast is because I heard Andy Stanley on his leadership podcast one time talk about that all leaders need to be ruthlessly curious about where their emotions come from. And that's what I realized through the whole process from early 2000s, when I was experimenting with drugs and alcohol and making really bad mistakes, on into the finding fitness and getting physically fit, and then pursuing CrossFit as a sport, but then also as a business owner. And then I came to the conclusion that I was just ruthlessly curious about life and where things come from and the origin of things and like relationships. And so fast forward, I have the opportunity to meet Andy Stanley, and I tell him the story, and he baptizes me. And it was just the coolest thing for my family. It was so cool for my boys to be there for my baptism, for my wife to be there. And it has just been, not that it doesn't make it any easier, by no means. Life is still hard, and it's going to be hard. And if you pursue your highest calling, it's going to be even harder, because the devil's going to be after you even more. But it gives your soul this peace and this joy that is unmatched. And it gives you a reason to just continue to get up and pursue.
Eric, I would say that was an extremely well shared story. And I think that listeners, Alex is showing both Eric and I Eric's podcast, Ruthlessly Curious. It's great. It's on Apple Podcasts. I think it's on Spotify too. and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
Google.
and to be fair, I have not recorded a lot of podcasts. We've recorded some, but it was one of those things where I had to start doing it. It's like anything. Like if you want to get healthy, what do?
You start doing it.
You do something, right? You have to do something. You find other people that are have the same values, and you hang around with those people, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want to be closer to the Lord, find people that are close to the Lord, right?
Yeah.
And so and so I get super passionate and just so amped up about the thing that I need to do now in my 40s. Now that I've gotten to this place where I'm at, now my responsibility, my housing is taken care of, food, shelter, like my children are healthy, my wife is healthy. Now it's my responsibility to go and help young men. That's my responsibility now.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of this story that you shared, Eric, and I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I kind of just want to talk about it and want you to share some more for the listeners. There's pivotal moment in your life, this recognition of sin and living in sin and the pursuit of things of this world, specifically before you came to know Jesus and pursuing alcohol and drugs and those things. And you said something that I want to talk a little bit about because I think it's just going to be really great to riff on and for the three of us to kind of chat on. You said you recognized that the Lord was giving you something else to replace what he wanted to strip away. And the thing that he was giving you was something to steward your physical health. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like the connection there and like why do you recognize that was something worth pursuing, and like how did you know that was what like God was leading you to, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I guess he had watched me fail so many times, and he had given me so many opportunities to be like, this is it. Like, this is your last, not this your last one. Like, that's kind of what I felt at the time. But it was one of those things where he knew that it had to be physical. Like I tried every other thing, right? I tried all the other replacements, if you will, and whatever those were. But he knew it was the one thing that I would go and be able to create community. I would go and be able to change my life physically, and then I could help other people do it as well. So I think it was just one of those things of me answering, finally stepping into my calling, so to speak. Like that's the only thing that I can explain. That's what it feels like every day. That's why it feels, I don't feel like it's easy and feel it like but I believe it's worth doing, right? Mm-hmm. I believe in my heart and my soul that this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I don't know. I don't know if does that answer the question?
I would say so.
Eric, so in your pursuit of greater levels of health in every area, I love your story. What have been some keystone habits that you've really prioritized practically? Like, let's just get to the nitty gritties. Like, hey, I need to prioritize my sleep or getting in the word. Like, what have been those keystone habits for you?
Yeah. So first and foremost, obviously sleep is number one, right? So even with two boys, in the house, we make sure we have them. Even in the summer, I mean, they go down maybe the latest is 9, right? And they also understand we're training and teaching and coaching them too, right? It's one of those things where we want to make sure that they know and understand who we are and our values, because the world's coming at some point. They're gonna it's going to be sooner rather than later. So we make sure that we set this foundation up like this. Sleep is number one, right? That's going to allow you, to kind of reset the brain, reset the body so that you can continue to make the best decisions that you possibly can every single day, right? Number one. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, waking up. As soon as I wake up, use the restroom, all that good jazz, the first thing that goes into my mouth is 30 ounces of water with fresh squeezed lemon and 2 grams of pink Himalayan salt. I've been doing that consistently for almost 12 to 13 years. And I don't even miss days. That's even on vacation. Immediately following the water, then it's quiet time. Quiet time is a mix of reading the Bible, journaling, and then reading whatever book it is that I'm reading at the time. So it's because I get up around 5:30 at the latest. So I have at least a good hour before my kids get up. And so that hour is dedicated to really feeding my my heart and my soul so that whenever they get up, it's time. Like it's time to cook their breakfast. It's time to serve them. And then obviously, I eat breakfast with my children, all that good stuff. And then it's off to work. But I will say this too. So, I mean, and I know everybody knows this, but obviously physical movement, unfortunately for me, is I'm moving all the time. And so I'm constantly moving in the gym. And so I will say that that component is kind of taken care of itself for me. And I know that can be hard for some people, but obviously physical movement is huge for the brain and for the body. So I think that's I guess that would be like number 4, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Eric, why do you feel like it's important for you to wake up and to have that time alone in the morning first?
That's a great question. And I think the easy answer would be, I guess maybe for me personally, it really sets the tone, right? It really, because I think the other thing that I didn't mention is I also make my wife's coffee at that time. And so that's also a way for me to set my intention so that so I get to serve her. Like she's one of her love languages is acts of kindness. And so that is to her, that is an act of kindness towards her. And so I think for me, it's just setting the intention, right? And so that I'm ready for whatever the day brings. My heart and my soul is ready, and I'm ready to get after it and to attack. And so I guess it's more about the intention, right?
Eric, I love the 30 ounces of water too, but I think a little bit unique approach is adding the lemon and the pink Himalayan sea salt. Why do you do that?
Okay, so gosh, man, this comes from, do you guys remember James Fitzgerald? I mean, he's still alive, but
yes.
So James Fitzgerald was the original OG, right? So OPT, which most people will probably, if they know it now, it would be OPEX. So I guess I had the opportunity to go and visit with him out in Arizona, and I did some of his educational courses, and that came from him. So the pink Himalayan salt, what it does is it helps you absorb the water. So obviously, it doesn't matter how much water you drink, it matters how much you absorb, right? So that's kind of where that piece came from. And so obviously the pink Himalayan salt is going to be a little bit more, I guess, healthy in terms of the micronutrients that you're going to get from it. And so that's that component. The lemon juice, they say that it helps with digestion because of the acids and all that good stuff. But it also helps with the flavor too. And so it's just something that I've been doing for, gosh, it's crazy, man. 12, 13 years, even on vacation. So, and I do switch it up too. So I'll do limes and lemons.
We didn't do that before we competed last year. You made me coffee, but you didn't make me that.
I would have definitely had my water. Sorry. Yeah.
You just did it without me looking. Is that why you were carrying me at some point?
I don't know about that. I think the picture was me in your arms at the end.
Well, that doesn't necessarily matter.
Listeners, context is that Eric and Trevor did a partner CrossFit competition, and they're just referring back to it because I could see some people being, what the heck are they?
What? Yeah, that's right. Carrying him. What was he carrying him for?
You guys had a good time there.
Yeah. Man, Eric, I think this is a great intersection at Holo, and we've talked about this so much in depth, but we talk about how health is connected.
Yeah.
God's invitation for us is health in every area of our life, body, mind, and soul. And we look at the life of Jesus and we can see that physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, he's healthy in every area. He embodies that. And as we like to say, listeners, just because like the three of us on this episode do CrossFit does not mean that you have to. But notice Eric talked about movement specifically. Notice Eric's talking about habits that he does specifically to nurture his spiritual, mental, emotional, relational, all areas of his health. So Eric, I want to know in the story, okay, it's a phenomenal testimony to the Lord's faithfulness, but I want to know in that story, where did you recognize that health is more than physical?
Yeah, I think that would have kind of started 2000. I think when the boys kind of came along, because I think it was with them mostly just because. So Brady's 9. Mm-hmm. I think when he was probably 3 or 4, I came to the conclusion because it's okay. So taking it back to CrossFit, obviously, I think I want to make sure that people understand this too, especially your listeners that may or may not do CrossFit. So there are people that you can actually go to a CrossFit gym and not compete, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very interesting component for some people. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. And so I want to make sure that people like that it's okay to not compete at the sport of CrossFit if you go to a CrossFit gym, number one. Number two, what I noticed with the boys, whenever they, especially, with Brady specifically, when he was 2 and 3 years old, he didn't need me to be a CrossFit athlete or a wannabe CrossFit athlete. So there just needed to be more complexity to it for me. Like I needed to be able to show up for my children, and like they didn't care what I did for my workout that day. Right. Mm-hmm. They didn't care what my back squat was and all that good stuff. And so it really shifted my mindset around what fitness started to mean to me and how I could use fitness to become a better father at the time. And that really shifted my mindset because, for me, I was like, if we would go on vacation, the vacation revolved around how was I going to get into the gym? I was going to have to get up early enough to go visit the local CrossFit gym so that I could get my workout in and all this good stuff. Everything revolved around that. And not to mention, like, it was an idol, right? Mm-hmm. It had become an idol. And I think, people we will justify anything. Well, at least it's not porn, or at least it's not alcohol, or at least it's something that's making me better. But anything in excess, it becomes a weakness. And so for me, my children really shifted my mindset about who I was and how I wanted to serve. And I will say this too, and I think this was probably a very pivotal moment for me as well. And so 2014-ish, 15-ish, probably 14, I hired my first business coach. I don't know if I've ever told you this, Trevor. Mm-hmm. I hired my first business coach. And one of the things that he had me do was he had two items that I had to complete before we would move on to like the next step or something like that. And he wanted me to write out my perfect day. And he also wanted me to write my eulogy before we did anything else, before we got into the numbers and before we got into, the operating procedures was how the gym worked, how many members we had, where we were trying to go, the vision, blah, 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 blah. Right. And so that exercise of writing the eulogy really showed me where my heart was at as well, and showed me who I was. And so it's just another way for the Lord to like show up in another exercise. Right. And so for me, who's someone I try to be hyper intentional about alignment. And I try to be hyper intentional about the words that come out of my mouth are the things that I believe. It's who I am. It's how I act. It's, all this being congruent. Right. And so that was another pivotal moment for me. And for any of you listeners that have ever had the opportunity to kind of go through an exercise like that, it really will shift your heart and mind about who you are, where you're at, and where you're wanting to go. And then after you write the eulogy, then you can cast the vision. Then you can write the vision about where your family's going to go and what it's going to look like and how you're going to operate within that. So,
Eric, you have the opportunity to help people achieve greater levels of health every single day from a very practical level. You're a gym owner. You're on the floor. It's a very communal experience. So you have a lot of conversations, a lot of relationships. I get to share that same pleasure as you. From your experience and context of health in general, it's connected, it's holistic, it's God's design. What have you seen are common struggles that people have in terms of achieving greater levels of health? And underneath those struggles, what are some common misunderstandings, false beliefs, things that they are going through that just you're like, hey, if you would just think like this, or just read, like, what are some of those obstacles that you've just witnessed over the years that you could just speak truth into?
So I think I really love the question, because one of the things that it makes me do is it makes me look at me, like it makes me look at my own faults. And I will tell you early on, one of the things that I really, probably my biggest mistake, I will say it was my biggest mistake from the relational component of my client, of me connecting with my clients, was I thought that everybody wanted the same success that I had in the gym.
Mm.
Instead of meeting them where they were or where they were at, I thought they wanted me to make them like, I thought that they were coming because they wanted to be like me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear that question, it's like, oh, it makes my armpits sweat. My armpits are sweating. Like it makes me like so, oh gosh, why was I like that? And so I think for me, that was my struggle because that I really struggled with that. And so obviously fast forward to now, I think pursuing pursuing something hard, whether it's physical fitness, whether it's spiritual fitness, whether it's whatever it is, it's going to be hard. And I think convenience has really worked our society and put us into a place where we've forgotten how to work hard. Like, and it's part of the process. And it's the thing that I love seeing people get better. I love hearing about other people's success financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like, I just love hearing about that. And I think one of the things that we were talking about earlier is being able to compliment another human. So I think it's really twofold, Alex. Like, back to your question. Number one, we don't know how to celebrate the success of other people. Number one. Number two, and maybe it's reversed, maybe the order's reversed, but when things get hard, we give up. And it's like, and so really, so I think, okay, so I like being able to point out a problem, and then let's give people this, let's talk about some solutions to that. You need to be in the right environment to have the kind of success that you want to have. You need to have people. Mm-hmm. You've got to have people. That's the only way. Like, I think, and I've played this through in my mind before, and not because anything's ever happened in my life, but I think the one thing that would hurt my soul is to pick up the phone and call Trevor and be like, bro, Natalie's leaving me because I made a stupid decision. Mm. Like, the accountability that him and I have, because I love, respect, and admire him so much, it would be so hard to call him and tell him that. So my point is, you got to have people around you that will hold you accountable. You got to have people that will speak truth into your life, that will tell you when things get tough, listen, your number one job in your marriage is to keep it holy. Bam. Whatever problems you're going through, that kind of solves everything. Keep your marriage holy, right? And so I think, it's easy to point the finger and tell people what the problem is. The hard thing is showing people how to put boundaries and solutions around it, mm-hmm. right? And I think but we don't live in a society. Most people aren't solutions oriented, right? Most mm-hmm. people are point the finger. Why did you do that? How could you do that? Justifying all that good stuff. But yeah, sorry.
No, that's great. And you're kind of touching on several of those factors that we recognize in ways that help us misunderstood, Eric. And you're talking about help is hard. Like, a lot of people, hard and challenging, I'd say those words are super interchangeable. Sure. And we like to say help isn't a challenge, but it's demanding. So like the language is confused, right? Like the pursuit of true help is something that is demanding. Like to do what love requires through scripture is demanding, right?
Yes, it is.
Incredible that that's the way that you recognize that. And then I just love the community piece. I mean, Alex and I talk about it all the time. You're going to go further faster with people that are like-minded and that have created an environment that supports where you feel like God is leading you, and it supports true health. It supports health from these areas of your life, the way that God designed it. I think that's awesome, Eric. As we're kind of finishing up our conversation here, there's just so much material, so many great things that I think listeners can relate to. And that's part of listeners, that's really why we try to have these conversations with different people is not any of us are perfect. None of
Yeah.
us will ever be, right? Not one of us are perfectly healthy. But we're all pursuing greater levels of health. We're all pursuing a truly healthy life that Jesus offers. And so that's why I think, Eric, people will get value because they're going to say, like, I can relate exactly to Eric. I can relate no matter where they are in that timeline, right? The spectrum
Sure.
of like pursuing greater levels of health for themselves. But I think I would love to just hear from you as we're kind of wrapping up is if you could share one thing or, a couple things for listeners to take away, and what would you tell them about pursuing true health, about pursuing greater levels of health the way the Lord designed?
Hmm. So I guess first and foremost is you have to remember, especially, coming at it from, I think, so I don't, the word success is associated with my life. And I, I don't, sometimes success needs to be defined, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you, for me personally, out of everything that's happened in my life over the last 20 years, the thing that I'm most proud of is my relationship with my wife.
Mm.
And for me, that the success starts there. There is no CrossFit DGA without Natalie. There's no Brady and Palmer. There's just so many components of it that would not even exist if it wasn't for the relationship that I have with Natalie. And I think for men, we often forget that our spouse wants to be pursued, right? They need a spiritual leader. I don't mean this in a negative way or how this may end up sounding. However, women tend to be a little more emotional. Men are kind of think more logically, and that in and of itself balances out that relationship. And so I think we just have to get back to the basics in terms of how we view our marriages and how we view success versus how the world wants us to view success, right? In terms of just the monetary components of it. And yes, like making money, it's super helpful. Like, of course it is. It affords you opportunities and allows you to do things that you would not otherwise do. But at the same time, the relationships, I think there's a quote that goes something like this. The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. And so that starts at home. I'm called to be a disciple, but I also have to disciple my children first. So everything for us really goes back to the home and taking care of the home first. And then everything after that is just another awesome part of life. And so that's my big takeaway. That's my biggest thing. Take care of your house. Take care of your home. Be a disciple to your children first. Take care of your wife. Serve her and build that relationship with her spiritually. And if you do those things, if you pray together and you spend time together and you you serve her and you take care of her love languages, your life is going to be better.
That's good, Eric. Yeah, listeners, I'd encourage you to just take something. There's so many just nuggets of wisdom. Eric, I love the way that you shared your story and encourage other people to pursue health. And you've been a blessing to me, and I know you've been super helpful for Alex and I and just our conversation. So, man, we're grateful that you took the time to be on our podcast and to share your story and pursuit of true health with listeners. I would ask, what is the best way for someone who's like, man, I want to keep tabs on Eric Bland? What's the best way that they can stay in touch or see what's going on?
So we're on Instagram and so CrossFit DGA, obviously, and you can find us there. We're on Facebook as well. And so, but I wanted to end with this because I think it's super important, for the listeners and for you too. I've over the last probably year or so, I've really watched you guys really pursue whole health and really do it in a way that is that congruent that being in alignment with the Lord and with your calling. And I have to tell you, it's so admirable, and it inspires and encourages me as a man I'm in my 40s, obviously, and so I have a long life to live, and I've got a lot more years to be on this earth and to continue to hopefully have an impact and influence in my community and communities that are attached. But what you guys are doing is absolutely amazing, and I love it. And so thank you for allowing me to be a small part of that. And so I'm super proud for you guys, and I want to see you guys just continue to pursue and do your thing and continue to have impact and influence. So,
Eric, we're going to do our best. I'll tell you that. We like to say, and this is one thing I would tell our listeners that I know Eric does super well, being faithful with what we're given and just allowing the Lord to bless that our faithfulness. And I would just say your words mean a lot, obviously, to Alex and I, and you've demonstrated that. So congruent leadership there. But personally, I think there's an Instagram they can find you as well. You shared the CrossFit DGA one, but
sorry, Eric J. Bland, maybe.
That sounds right. Alex, any final parting thoughts?
Eric, this is a blessing. Thank you so much for just sharing and being vulnerable and transparent. I think that's another thing that we lack as far as just being real. So I appreciate your realness. And honestly, just your influence on Trevor's life. We all know that he needs as much help as he can get. So
that's so true.
I don't know about that.
Your help when he was in Dublin, and now he's my ministry project up here. Let's just keep praying for him. But no, in all reality, Eric, we're truly grateful for you and your impact, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and to that, Alex, I think it's really interesting. I think that sometimes people can look at our lives, especially through social media, and think that we have it all figured out. And I'll be very honest with you and tell you that I don't. And so for me, it's about that pursuit of trying to figure it out, but also trying to align that with God's calling in my life. And so that's the challenge, right? And that's the fun part. And so now we have this incredible responsibility to share that with the world. And I don't feel like it's a burden at all. As a matter of fact, I feel like it's like somebody gave me the torch and I'm ready. Like, it's time. Let's do this. And so people got to get back to having fun, man. You got to get back to having fun. You got to remember that your wife is your number one partner, and your children need you. Your children, I'm talking to men, like your children need you to show up every single day and be the man that they need in their life. And so for me, man, that's what it's about, and that's what I do. And so that's my calling, and I take it probably way too serious sometimes, but anyways.
It's awesome. Eric, thanks for being on. Listeners, we hope that you find some value in this conversation, and we look forward to having the next episode. We will see you guys later. Eric,
thank you. Love you guys.
See you, Eric.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more, check us out on social media or visit holohealth.com to learn how you can start living a truly healthy life today. That is HOLOHLTH.com. Thanks.